Hey guys, it's Creighton again from the Republic Echelon, coming back to you with part 2 of kind of my beginner's guide to the galaxy. So for those of you who are very familiar with the classes, naturally this guide's not going to be for you. For those of you who are just starting out, maybe have a little bit of questions or unsure of yourself, hopefully this will give you a little bit of insight. This is not going to be incredibly in-depth, but we're just going to kind of go over a few classes in the game, roles, how they may affect the way you play and raid. This is only going to be PvE. I probably won't make a PvP, although I used to be heavy into PvP. So this guide we're going to talk about ranged. There are really 3 different classes of ranged, which we're going to look at: the Trooper, the Gunslinger, and the Sage. Now, the Trooper and the Sage, they have heal spec, but we're not going to cover the heal spec. We'll go on that when we make the healing guide. Right now we're going to focus on just the range aspect of it. So the very first one we're going to talk about is my personal favorite, the Gunslinger. The Gunslinger, to me, it's probably the most fun ranged DPS I've had when I played the game, although he's not my main. My main happens to be, a different class, but Gunslinger, very fun. There's 3 different trees, like every other class. Gunslinger is one of those ones where there's only DPS. You're not gonna go and heal in. You definitely can't tank, although you might pull a lot of threat to make you a tank, but you're not gonna be tanking. So there's actually one tree I'm not even familiar with. In the Gunslinger, there's the Sharpshooter, which is the one that majority people play. It's a very high DPS, kind of slow depending on the ability. It ranges in either cast time, channel time, instance. Very good. As long as it's played correctly, you'll do a lot of damage. If you're not playing the class correctly, maybe your skill, your stat tree, not skill, your stat tree is incorrect, maybe your talent's incorrect, that's all gonna affect every DPS in the game, not just the ranged. So the Marksman, there's also another kind of AoE spec where you're really actually not even hunkered down all that much, more dots and grenades. Also a very good spec. Naturally, anytime you can have something that does a lot of AoE, and no matter what scenario you play, gives you an advantage. But if you have a spec of, regardless of what you're playing, that does very well on single target, also a very good thing to have. So the Marksman tree, very good against single targets, decently effective against multiple targets, mainly due to use of flyby and the increase of cooldown that you get with flyby. Flyby, like I've said in the other video, in my opinion, is probably one of the best, if not the best AoE in the game. Massively effective. The Gunslinger is all kind of a proc system, so you are managing your procs, and a proc is just something where you'll cast an ability and something pops up for free. So that's my version, or my way of using proc. If you have a different version of it, fantastic. So the Gunslinger, very around the proc of Trick Shot. Aim Shot procs Trick Shot, Bolster Blast procs Trick Shot, which just resets the cooldown. Trick Shot's very effective, very good. And it's a very kind of high pace, what you kind of would expect from a Star Wars game as a DPS. And it's ranged, so range is very nice to have. You have Hunker Down, which kind of makes you immune to CC. You have a few, naturally, you have your aggro dump, you got a few defensive cooldowns that you can use. Nothing's gonna really make you, if something's gonna be hitting you hard, they're gonna be kind of hitting you hard. So that's just gonna be the way it's gonna go, but very fun to play. Next we're gonna talk Sage. Sage, 2 different DPS trees, of course. There's the burst spec, there's the dot spec, like every class in the game has. The nice thing about the Sage, though, the burst spec also doubles as its AoE spec. And the AoE spec is just that you're going to be able to use the same not the same proc system, but a proc system that allows you to get an instacast, and that ability is an AoE. So Sages are very good at, DPS. The range of it is very good. You don't want to be standing next to the boss, which I've seen plenty of people do. Remember, range is ranged, melee is melee, and they don't like to play the other way. Melees don't really like to play good at ranged. Ranged don't really like to play good as a melee. But as long as you keep to your rotation as a Sage, you'll do very well. You'll do very good on the parsers, especially in that AoE spec, which is actually kind of misleading, which if, that's kind of the way you like to roll, that's fine. The reason why I say misleading, although maybe you're focusing on one target due to the fact that you're an AoE, you're going to be hitting things on the left and the right, kind of getting a little bit of a global help with everybody else around you, burning them down a little bit slow, and falsifying your numbers in the parser. The dot spec, on the other hand, like any other dot spec, it's just mainly rotation of dots. Your rotation of the Sage is dramatically changed versus the telekinetic rotation, but it's very effective. It can build threats, so be careful. And they're actually kind of pretty straightforward, both the specs. It's a lot of either telekinetic throw or disturbance, and it's a whole lot of repeating. So I like, personally, telekinetic. It's a very kind of fast pace, whole lot of things going on. When you're using your rotation, it looks like you're doing a lot of damage, it feels like you're doing a lot of damage, and the parser is going to reflect that as well. It's a very, very fun tree. So if you're going Sage, you don't want to go healer, those are your options that you're going to be able to use, and both of them are equally effective in raids. And last but not least is the Commando. Now, I didn't do these in any particular order. I don't think one's easier than the other. One class of the Gunslinger, to me, is not any easier than the Sage or the Commando. Commando, like the Sage, 2 DPS specs due to 1 healing spec. You have the burst spec, the gunnery, and you have the dot spec, the assault. Both of them are very good at doing what they do. The gunnery spec, if done right, will have a significant edge over the assault spec, but the assault spec, if done right, can definitely carry its own weight, and it will compare very close to the gunnery spec. So both of them, to me, are very similar. It all depends on your playstyle. The gunnery spec is your traditional kind of single target. We're going to throw out the fact that the Commando has probably the best AoE selection in the game. So gunnery, very good at single target. Very good at single target. You're going to want to make sure your rotation is nice and solid, so you're going to want to either look up rotations, or I might one day publish a recommended rotation on my guild's website, or have somebody else do it. But the gunnery spec, very good for single targets, as well as I said, the Commando itself is just a stud in the amount of AoEs it has. So we're going to kind of say it's a wash on both of them. The dot spec, on the other hand, is very, very similar to the Vanguard dot spec. The only difference is Vanguard's a melee class and the Commando is a ranged class. So it's just where you're attacking from. High impact bolt's going to be your best friend. It's also used in the gunnery spec as well. But your best friend, it's all about proccing high impact bolt, keeping your target on fire. There's a couple, there's 2. There's Incinerate Round and the Plasma Grenade that will apply the burning buff, but If you don't apply the brain buff to your target and just stick with the rotation without it, you are not going to be comparable to the gunnery spec. No way, no how. All your damage is going to come from high impact bolt and incinerate around. Your dot is your best friend, that's why it's the dot spec. Like I said, the Commando has the best selection in AoEs. You have Hail of Bolts, which is just kind of a spray of AoE, and the Gunslinger gets something very similar to it. And it's probably the weaker-ish of the AoEs it has. It has Plasma Grenade, which you throw a grenade, kind of lights everything in fire in a little area. So that's another AoE you have, and then you have Mortar Volley, which every Commando has, great ability. You also have Sticky Grenade, which is something that not a lot of people think of in using offensively or accidentally using when you're in an op. Prime example is, some ops, you crowd control a couple characters. You throw, now you're DPS on one target. If you happen to throw that sticky grenade and it goes off anywhere near somebody, remember, it is an AoE. So it's going to knock them out. And depending on if you're in a pug or not, people might be a little pissed off at you. So, just remember that one. So this is my, like I said, just a quick little overview on the three range classes in the game. You got the Gunslinger, not the melee. You got the Gunslinger. You got the Sage. You got the Commando. All three of them, whole loads of fun. Remember, the key to the range in the game is maintaining range. You are not going to stand next to the boss, nor should you stand next to the boss. I mean, just remember, range is ranged, and melee is melee, and for some people, that is a hard concept to understand. So if you happen to watch all the videos I make, you're going to hear that a whole heck of a lot. Thanks, guys.